All right. Welcome to the Fall into Tech podcast, hosted by myself, Jamil. I'm laughing just because we were messing around with the soundboard earlier, but I'm Jamil. I'm here with Michael Rodriguez. We're two Marines turned techies, and on this podcast, we chat with fellow veterans about their journey from military to technology. And um, this is in hopes of helping you with your tech career here.
Yeah, tune in weekly for guest interviews. We discuss things like specific tech roles, day in the life of those roles, different career paths you can take, and just overall tips for succeeding in tech. And today, we're honored to have Alex Peterec. Thank you for joining us, Alex.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, Alex is a former Army soldier turned software engineer. And we always start with a fun little segment where our guest gives a fun fact. So, what do you got, Alex?
Yeah, so I am a child of a deaf adult, also known as a coda. So my parents are deaf. I've been speaking two languages my entire life, so English and sign language. And on top of that, I'm teaching my dog sign language too. That's always been a thing. So yeah, it's a unique fun fact about me.
Did not know dogs could learn sign language.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
interesting.
How does that work?
Honestly, it's just like kids, man. They pick up sign language a lot quicker than you would think. And my parents taught our golden retrievers when I was a kid, so they knew like sit, go potty, food, stay, stuff like that. And I've been teaching my little man Conan over here. He just hit 6 months, but I've been teaching him, and they're just like kids. They eat it up, man. It's another way to help them understand commands and so forth. So it's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, that's so crazy. Well, yeah, why don't you kind of talk to us about your military background here? I know you were in the Army. Tell us why you joined that branch and dive into, the time period you served, your MOS. Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, so I was an active duty Army guy. I mean, the main reason why I joined at that time, I joined when I was 20, and pretty much I just wanted to go fight. That's pretty much it. I joined with a Ranger contract, an option 40. It didn't make it, which is okay. Still went to an airborne infantry unit up in Anchorage, Alaska, 425. And I was there for 7 years. I deployed to Afghanistan with Baker Company 3509th back in September 2017 to May 2018, working alongside 10th Special Forces Group fighting ISIS-K. So we went on missions with them where there are extra bodyguards for missions, additional fire support, drivers, gunners, you name it. We did that. Very lucky, very fortunate. And yeah, came back in May of 2018 and was around for a few more years after that. And I got out in May of 2023 after, May of 2023 is when I got out. Jeez. So it's been over a year at this point.
Yeah, and it's been a crazy transition. I remember connecting with you when you initially got out, and you hadn't had your first role yet, and yeah, time flies, man. And look where you're at now.
Yeah,
But
it's crazy.
it's so crazy. Tell us about going back to the military. Tell us about some of your best and worst times while you were in.
Oh man, I would say probably best times were on deployment. Ironically, that's like the part I actually do miss because you had a lot of purpose doing what you did or being over there, and I felt very fulfilled in what I was doing. And there's a part of me, like I think there's a part of everybody that kind of has like that good old days feeling to where the war's over, which is one of the reasons why I got out. But if you could go back to that sliver of time and gosh, what TV show is it from? I don't know if it's The Office or what, but it says there was an actor. He was like, I wish there was a time for you or a way for you to know what the good old days are in the moment, right? And so I think a lot of times we romanticize that part, even though it was also hard. That was also the time that where I felt like I had the most pride in what I was doing and I had a lot of purpose. And I loved it. I was very passionate about it and I really cared. And I would say the worst time for me, oh man, it's kind of hard because I think honestly it'd probably be like post deployment. If I'm being completely honest, I think there was definitely a shift in my mentality, kind of like a cocky one, if I'm being honest with you, to where a lot of things that we were doing in garrison life, I was like, why are we doing this? This is stupid. This is not what we did on deployment. And even though it might be technically right, or really it didn't matter, the junior soldiers, when you're a senior specialist at that time, when they haven't deployed, they don't understand that and they just see the attitude, right? And so it kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. Some people didn't really care. But that ended up causing me a lot more issues than it needed to be, if I'm being honest with you. One of my buddies that lives here in Phoenix, he was like, yeah, you had an SF mentality or special forces mentality of, let's just chill the hell out. Let's focus on what actually matters and stop asking why, to where I was a very independent person and I knew my job, but I would butt heads with a lot of people, not because they were wrong or anything, but because a lot of the stuff we were doing at the big Army level in garrison life was just like, all right, this is not how we did things in, overseas. Like, let's use common sense here. And sometimes when you go back to garrison life in the Army, you didn't do that. If I'm being like, you went back to stupid being stupid, unfortunately, if that makes sense. If you guys have deployed, you probably can relate to some degree.
Yeah, totally, man. And so just like the war kind of, dwindling down, is that the biggest reason why you got out?
Yeah, that was the biggest reason. So my last few years, I had a goal to go to SFAS. And so I lost like 60 pounds and just focused on myself and lost a ton of weight, and leadership was very supportive of that, because I went to a company armorer role at that time and ran a pretty good shop. So I went, didn't make it. That's okay. Not a big deal. Met some really good guys that I'm still friends with today. But after that, I also realized that I struggle a lot with anxiety, and with the war dwindling down, at that time essentially being over, and also the mental health concerns I had for myself, I really asked myself, is this field worth it for me? Is this something that I really want to do? Because a lot of guys in these, type A fields, a lot of times they might be type A guys in one area of their life, but they've got no family life, or they've got sleep issues, they've got drug issues, infidelity issues, financial issues, alcohol issues. I mean, you name it, right? It bleeds over eventually. And I guarantee you there are guys that are able to hold it together. But I mean, my fitness coach, he's a former 10th Special Forces Group guy. And I'm glad I met him through Instagram, because he lives here right in Phoenix. But I mean, he's like, dude, like all my buddies have issues like that, right? And it's one of those things where seeing a lot of that stuff and the war being over, I was like, is this really, really worth what I thought it was going to be? Or is my mental health really worth that because of where I was at? I've always struggled with my mental health, and I try to be upfront with that and transparent, because a lot of people don't, especially as guys. We want to act like we have it together. And I was like, to me, I'm more than a uniform. I'm more than just, because at the end of the day, like, the military is going to take and take and take. It's selfless service for a reason, right? And at a certain point, you've got to look at yourself and say, hey, how much am I willing to give and sacrifice to do that? And for me, at that point, I was 26, 27, and I was like, this isn't worth it to me. Like the amount of anxiety or stress I put myself under. I like parts of my job, but I wasn't even really doing those anymore. We weren't deploying anymore. And I'm like kind of sitting here like, I'm not really challenged intellectually. I felt very, very stuck. And that's why I wanted to go to SFAS. But once I realized that's really not for me, and I think there are more important things for me, I had to make that decision for myself, right? And nobody can. Like, you're the person, whether you choose just to go in that field, or you decide to leave that field or pursue certain things, like, you're the only person that's going to have to sit on your rocking chair or lay in your deathbed and be like, hey, I made those choices and I have to be okay with that and live with those things. Right. And for me, I chose to walk away for, the war being over, but also my mental health. And wanting to actually prove to myself that I'm more than a uniform, because for all I knew, like that's all I wanted to do with my life was to be a soldier and to be an airborne infantry guy and, fight and deploy. And I think definitely romanticized it to a high degree and idolized that. And when I hit that point of where I was like, I'm more or less of a man because of it, I was like, all right, this is not good, because at a certain point, this will come to an end. And whether it is due to retirement or a med board or because I'm choosing to walk away, how are you going to at least you have a choice. Right. And so, I saw the writing on the wall for me and I decided to pursue something else. That's simply what I did.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that info there.
Yeah.
And I guess that kind of brings an interesting question. Next question of, okay, airborne infantry, been in for a while. How do you even discover tech or get interested in tech?
Yeah. So when I decided to get out, I had less than a year. I decided to get out in May, or not May, but I was thinking about getting out in like July or August of 22. And I decided to leave in September of that year. And so I had less than a year until I was getting out. I had like 9-10 months. And I was like, all right, if I'm going to get out, I need to set myself up for success, right? I set it up and I looked at it objectively. All right, what fields out there are going to give me the best return on my investment or the best opportunity cost was the way I viewed it. And looking at like the STEM fields is like, all right, am I going to have to go back to school? Can I do some certifications? If it's like the tech field, what's out there? And I just started doing a ton of research, and I was really considering, doing either law stuff or doing medicine, but I knew friends in medicine that were like, don't go into it. It is purely about the money and you will be working your butt off and you will be treated not the best. There's, a few people I know that are lawyers. There's a gal that I dated that was a lawyer, and they're all great people, but they also work to the bone, and law school is, tens of thousands of dollars per year in debt. And so is medical school, right? Depending on what you do. And so with my GI Bill, it only covers an undergrad. So unless I applied for an additional grant from the VA, medical school or law school, that's going to be put on, that's debt that I have to take on, right? And we know that student loan debts are like the second highest thing to credit card debt and or auto loans. And so I was like, all right, I don't want to go into a ton of debt, but I want to get into a field that's going to set me up for the best chance of success. And so I kept on coming back to tech out of all the fields. I was like, all right, well, I built computers when I was younger. I always liked technology. So I started doing more research into like cybersecurity, cloud computing, and cloud administration. But I didn't really know like how to even really like break into the industry. So I watched a ton of YouTube videos of like, oh, you just need this certification and this certification. And I'm like, oh, really? Like I only need a few certifications and I can break in, thinking like I needed some, some degree or anything. And I mean, that's still a viable path and a good one, but the tech industry in the US is so, there's so much opportunity that you don't need one, right? You can start at different levels, whether it's doing IT help desk or going to a coding bootcamp and being a developer that way, or being a SOC analyst for like entry level cyber, right? Like those are different things. And I was originally considering like AWS cloud administration for a Skillbridge, which is, a program that the DoD puts on. And I remember running into one of my buddies that I served with or deployed with, and he still lived up in Alaska at the time. His name's Dan. And he was like, hey, you should talk to Chris. He's working at AWS as a software engineer, and he did something similar to what you did. And Chris was another buddy that I was really good friends with. And he got out, but he went to school in Seattle, and he got like his degree in psychology because he did green to gold, but for the reserves. And turns out he also did a coding boot. He did the MSSA Microsoft coding boot camp and got on through the Amazon Veterans Apprenticeship that they had at the time. And so I called him up in December because I was like figuring out like what to do. I was like going through a ton of stuff at that time. But once I had that phone call with him and another buddy I served with named Lyle, they're both software engineers at AWS. I mean, Chris has a degree in psychology, and Lyle dropped out of his degree path for like exercise science or something. I don't want to don't confirm me on that, but he was going to school in Colorado for a degree that he was like, yeah, this ain't going to make me anything. And he dropped out and he went to a coding boot camp and he got on through their veteran apprenticeship as well. And so I spoke with them in December and they were like, hey man, yeah, like you can get on through a coding boot camp. We'll help you, kind of get you set up like what you need to know. And for me at that time as a man of faith, I was like, all right, I think this is it. Cause I've been praying about like opportunities to kind of open a door. There seems to be a clear path here of buddies that I know and trust, like not somebody that's trying to just take my money for this coding boot camp or this certification, but rather, guys that I can truly trust that have been down this road, who have already been out, who are really successful and making over six figures. One doesn't have a degree and the other one has a degree in psychology and is, making more money as an engineer at AWS than anything else. Right. And so that's when I started doing a lot of research on software development and coding boot camps. And that's what led me to my coding boot camp as a Skillbridge that started in February of 2023 and lasted until June of that year, a month after I got out in May.
Gotcha. So, okay. So sounds like you went through Galvanize boot camp, correct?
Yep.
And can you so there's a lot of people that are trying to get into tech and, the big options for the most part are, 4-year degree, computer science, coding boot camp.
Yeah.
Or I suppose the third one is, learn by yourself, build some really cool projects, and you can get hired that way by just kind of showing your skill.
Yeah.
I went through coding bootcamp as well. Can you kind of walk someone through what the coding bootcamp was like on a day-to-day basis, how it worked, in case they're interested in one?
Yeah, for sure. So Galvanize for me was a full stack boot camp. So for those that don't know what that means, basically it's where you work on website design or front end, and then you work on server development or back end, and then you also work with a database. So you're able to kind of get your feet wet in every single thing to understand how things work at a very big level. That way, at the entry level, whenever you start, it kind of gives you a lot of flexibility depending on what path you want to take. And so that's what Galvanize teaches. The ones they taught us, or our tech stack, was full stack JavaScript. So it was React, Express, Node, which Express and Node work together. And then we also learned Postgres for a SQL database. So stuck to a more relational database model. And for us, the program was 17 and a half weeks, excuse me. And so we were doing class about 8 hours a day, and I was on Central Time. So I was getting up at like 4 a.m. Alaska time because I was also studying for my cloud certification, but we would start class at 6 a.m. So yeah, 6 a.m. we would start class, but that was Alaska time. So Central Time, that was 3 hours. So at 9 Central, we would start and we would finish by about, I think like 4 to 5. Some days it would be shorter, but that was the time that was allocated every day, 5 days a week. And we did that for 4.5 months. And they pretty much like just shotgun effect, like or fire hose effect, excuse me, everything that you need to know at a very basic level when it comes to full stack software development. And JavaScript is they stuck with that just because it's probably the easiest one to teach. And I wish they would have taught Java as like a backend thing or a more object-oriented language. But, beggars can't be choosers. It was a program that was paid for by the DoD or the VA, excuse me, and worked for DoD Skillbridge. So it didn't cost me anything. But it was the best one for me personally. And it gave me the structure that I needed because I really didn't know where to start. Because like in the tech world, it's like you read about cloud deployment, you learn about this language and that language. I mean, there's so much out there that I was like, how does all this even tie together? Like that, like to me, that's kind of where I was at because I had no idea what I was getting into. And so I kind of needed a guiding hand. I mean, I was still a self-starter and I wanted to do that, but I chose the boot camp because a lot of these veteran apprenticeships with various companies that they may partner with or companies just put on themselves require you to either have a CS degree or to have coding bootcamp experience. And that's why typically if you're self-taught, that's kind of like the hardest route to go because there's like you didn't go to a coding boot camp, right? There's no curriculum where they can kind of measure your knowledge that they can use against like other peers that may be from that same program, right? Not saying it's impossible. Typically, if you're going to be self-taught, you're probably going to get on at like a startup or a smaller company. And it's definitely possible. It's not like it isn't, but I would say it probably would have been a lot harder for me to break in on top of the challenging market that it was at that time. I mean, it was people in 2023. I mean, we were going through like tens of thousands of layoffs in those like first 6 months to 8 months. And I remember texting my AWS buddies. I was like, yo, are you guys safe? You guys good? They're like, yeah, dude, our departments, we're revenue producing. We don't have to worry about it. We're good, man. I mean, it was stuff that was like tech support roles or marketing or just stuff like that wasn't really revenue producing or projects that really weren't going anywhere and they were perfectly fine. But, you know, as an outsider looking in from a company, that's all you hear. You're like, yo, bro, you good? So yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I did for my boot camp, 9 hours a day. And there was time built in there with it being a Skillbridge program for us to clear the installation and stuff for like Army folks. The Air Force at that time requires people to be fully cleared and done with clearing before they start. I don't know how that is now. I know Skillbridge rules have changed in regards to timelines and this and that because people were tired of losing their soldiers at 6 months instead of, 3, right? And so they're like, oh no, you can only do a 3-month Skillbridge. And at that point, I was like, all right, these, the DoD has to balance a fine line between meeting their manning demands and also setting up their soldiers for success. And at the end of the day, the career skills program, or not the CSP, but the like SFL TAP program for the Army, Soldier for Life Transition Assistance Program. I don't know what they call it for the Army or the Marines, but probably something similar. A lot of times they kind of just throw so much at you and give you all these books. And it's decent. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not bad, but it's really, they're throwing you to the wind, man. Like they're throwing you to the wind and you've got to figure it out. And the only person that's going to care is yourself at the end of the day, period. And that goes for the same in the boot camp. Like doing a boot camp alone is not going to, like, it'll help you, give you a good foundation, but it's not going to be like a golden ticket. It's not like the same thing is like with cloud certifications. People think that it's a golden ticket if you get your AWS solutions architect. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, you and 50,000 other people have it. So what does that say? What skills or projects have you done in conjunction to that in order to justify your hiring or your potential and the reason why we should hire you as an entry level engineer, right? Or DevOps guy or insert whatever role you want. So
I've heard some really great things about Galvanize. Like, I think it's considered a premium coding boot camp. Could you quickly talk to us about some of the prep work you might have had to do
yeah.
for
So
Galvanize?
yeah, so Galvanize is like Hack Reactor's sister company. I can't remember which one bought out which, but they're like kind of merged. Like Galvanize is like their veteran version, I believe. They're definitely, they have a pretty good reputation. The prep work for my program was just like a series of modules that I think was like roughly about 20 hours worth of coding and work. But it was just learning the basics of variables and just like solving just basic algorithms. Like it wasn't anything like major. But I will say at that time when you're learning and drinking through a fire hose and trying to cram, It's definitely a challenge. Honestly, the reason why that prep work is there is really, it's kind of like a filter to where, hey, if you're not willing to do this prep work, then we don't want you in our program, right? Because in order for Galvanize or Hack Reactor to get paid, you have to essentially get placed into a job or a similar one in the IT field in order for them to get paid by the VA. They only get paid like 50% initially, or not initially, but like halfway through the program. And then like the other 50% is once you actually find meaningful employment in that field. That's a pretty flexible term, but that's like the IT field, right? So they have some money and skin in the game in order to help you out. But that prep work was like basic stuff of just creating variables of different types, learning how to manipulate strings, integers, just really basic stuff like that. And from there, just solving basic algorithms, and that's pretty much it.
And I had already gotten out before I went to my coding boot camp. Can you talk to us about, in case someone's listening that's still in, what is Skillbridge? How do you find a Skillbridge opportunity, or how do you get into this program?
Yeah, so Skillbridge is like the DoD name, or the DoD wide name for something that the Army would call the Career Skills Program. And basically, Skillbridge is a retraining program that the Department of Defense allows service members to do within their last, I believe, 6 months of training. It could change. It could be 4 months now. I don't really know. I'm not in. But essentially, it's a way for you to set yourself up for success on the outside. And even if you do that program, like with CSP, you're still getting paid by the Army while you do it, right? So you're getting active duty pay. And so this partnership with these companies, or somebody you may find that's willing to train you, essentially, like, you're still getting paid full-time Army wage, whether you're an O1, O2, O4, or E2 or E5, you're getting that rate of pay the entire time you're doing your CSP, right? So it gives you a really good kind of buffer window to like gain some skills and experience to transfer you to an entry level role on the outside, whether you want to go be a plumber or a truck driver, or you want to go be a lineman, or you want to go into IT and do software or cyber. There's some really good programs out there. Or you can also do like a custom route to where you can actually call up an organization and you can talk with them and say, hey, like I'm in, like one that I think would probably come to mind is like if you're like a JAG officer, right? And you want to do lawyer stuff on the outside, you could probably call a law firm and say, hey, I've got all this experience doing this stuff in the Army with JAG, right? This is all my lawyer experience, whatever that may be. I'd really love to partner with you guys and secure a role on the outside. It might be more complicated than that. I don't know, but this is just a generalized example. And basically you just have to fill out a custom form for like the Army side, for like the career skills program. And then you can send that off to JAG themselves. They're the ones that would have to approve it. It's just like a simple investigation to make sure it's a legitimate organization. And they make sure you're going to be given a curriculum to learn and be set up for success for the civilian world and that civilian job, right? So that's kind of one example I would use. But for linemen, you could go to lineman school. I know a guy that I served with did that, and he's doing really well for himself right now. But it's not just tech; it's across various industries, and it's within 4 to 6 months of service, and you still get paid while you're like on active duty while transitioning out, right? So it's a really good program. It really sets you up for success. And I would say if you don't know about it, go to your local TAP office or transition assistance program. That's what it would be in the Army. For the other branches, I don't know what it'd be. Hopefully you know what that equivalent would be. And more than likely they'll have information. A lot of leadership try to keep it on the DL because they don't really want to lose their soldiers 6 months early, because we all know they have a retention problem, and I wonder why. But yeah, it's a great program. I think it's probably the best thing I did for myself getting out, and I am glad that I was able to get the funding from VetTech. I'm glad that it didn't cost me a dime and it saved me 20 grand, right? Because that's how much Galvanize cost. So very, very thankful for that. But that's kind of that's what Skillbridge is and how it works and how you can get started on that.
Yeah, I also use VetTech. For those who don't know, it's a program where you don't touch GI Bill. They would just give funding every new fiscal year, but currently it's not a thing anymore. It stopped earlier this year, unfortunately, but maybe one day they'll bring it back, hopefully.
Yeah.
But going forward here, so talk to me about how you actually, got an interview for your first role, or how you got into it. Was it through the boot camp? Was it through a veterans program? How did you actually land that first role?
Yeah. So this is the hardest part about breaking into tech, especially software development, but I think any industry. Tech is just a lot harder to break into nowadays because the competition is so high. For me, how I got on was not through my boot camp, but network connections from it. So from day one of my boot camp, I was networking like mad. Like every single day. Like if I wasn't coding and doing my boot camp stuff, I was on a LinkedIn call, interviewing and talking with somebody. I was sending out connection requests. Like I got the premium because you get it like 1 year for free as a veteran. Signed up for that. Was doing like 100 connections a week. And I've got like over 1,500 connections now. But like I think by the end of my boot camp, I had networked with over 40 people or companies or something like that. Within those 4 months, like I did not have a life outside of all of this. Like I knew that the way I viewed it, I would be screwing myself over if I did not work my butt off to break into this industry and give it everything I have. And so for me, one connection I ran into was a Galvanize boot camp graduate who was also from the Army as well, but he was working for Wells Fargo, and he was one of the guys I'd connected with. And, we had spoke a little bit every now and then. He was a really good guy. And he actually hit me up one day and he was like, "Hey man, our next vet cohort for Wells Fargo is coming up here in the fall for 2023. And, are you still looking for a role? Like, are you still interested?" And at that time, I was wrapping up my boot camp and I had only had like 1 or 2 interviews. And I had applied to about 150, 200 roles tops by the time I got an offer from Wells. But even then, like those odds, right? Like those odds are actually pretty good compared to the horror stories of what I've heard from other people. I think I had about 10, like 5 to 10, probably like 7 actually, like initial phone screens, or like 10 initial phone screens. About half of those went to a second round, and then about half of those turned into an actual offer. And for me, I was kind of shocked about the whole Wells Fargo thing. Their process was the longest out of all of them, but it's also because they had 1,000 applicants and only 40 slots to fill. That I later find out. And only a third of those were for software engineers. The other ones were for marketing. It wasn't just a tech program; it was a veteran hiring initiative put on by Wells Fargo. And it's a 2-month or 8-week long full-time internship. So you get paid full-time hourly, but it's at like a reduced rate. And then from there, which like the conversion rate to full-time employment after that is like 97%. The 3% that don't is typically they get another offer from another company and they choose to go. Most of the time, their plan is they want to bring you on. So if you get in through the internship, unless you do something like to really hurt the company or do something reckless, more than likely you will get hired on if you're brought on through the veteran full-time internship. But that's how I got on, was through a network connection that recommended me for the vet program, which once again, networking, any interview that I had was from networking purely. Like it wasn't any cold application. There was only one time out of those like 3 offers or interviews that I had where the founder of a company reached out to me, and they were a smaller company based on the East Coast. Nextlink Labs are really great. But they were waiting to bring on more customers at that time. And with them being a smaller company, their budget's a little bit smaller. So they were like, "Hey, we'd love to have you, but we can't bring you on and not pay you." Right. So it was one of those things where I reached out to them and I was like, "Hey, I've got a full-time offer. I'd really like to know, because they were actually my first pick, if I'm honest with you. And they were really great, but just timing didn't work out. And so Wells Fargo gave me a really good offer, and I put Phoenix as my top location because I have a few friends I served with and deployed with that live here. Like 2 of my best friends from the Army live here, and I put I think it was like Phoenix or Scottsdale as my first location, and the second was Chandler. I didn't know that like Chandler was on the other side of Scottsdale, and there were 2 towns that are essentially within, like, right in Phoenix, and it's just really the spread out metro. But I mean, they gave me Arizona, and they were like, "Yeah, can you get down here in 3 weeks?" And I was like, "I'll figure it out. I'm gonna make this happen." So within 3 weeks, I packed up my entire life and drove from Alaska down to Arizona to start a whole new career after getting out.
I can't even imagine that drive, man.
It's beautiful, but I was glad it worked out because I was able to get the military movers to come on a 1-week notice, which is like almost unheard of. Like, I'm extremely lucky that somehow happened. And then throughout the drive, unfortunately, started having a lot of leg pain. And the first day I was here, as I was unpacking my car, realized my left leg was swollen and I could barely walk, and I couldn't figure out why. Well, I went to the ER, and it turns out I had a blood clot in my groin. So that was my first day in Arizona, and it was like 100 plus degrees. I'll be fully honest, like at that time, like I was pretty much broke. And I had like nothing in my apartment except like the stuff from my car, like my kitchen stuff, and enough clothes until my shipment of household goods got here. And yeah, I was in the hospital like the first week I was here, and I had to get a massive blood clot. And the reason why was because I had essentially slept and drove in a car for 3.5, 4 days and was pulling like 12-hour days, just hauling butt, getting down here as soon as possible. And I didn't realize that I almost unintentionally killed myself. So I am very thankful to the man above for the doctors and hospital staff for saving my life. It wasn't because it was like a genetic thing. They definitely believe it was due to May-Thurner syndrome and it being provoked due to the long periods of sitting. And May-Thurner syndrome is basically where an artery puts pressure on a vein. And so it's actually pretty common, but a lot of people don't sit in a car for 3.5, 4 days and also sleep in it and barely move. I did that. And so, yeah, I was on blood thinner for like 6 months after that. Wasn't able to ride my motorcycle, which is like my therapy. And so, yeah, no, dude, it's been a wild ride the past year and a half. Like, when I say it's been the toughest one I've ever had, it, like, I definitely mean it. So, I'm very thankful that I've got a full-time job, within tech, especially with the economy right now. Very thankful that it's something stable. Thankful for this little golden retriever bundle of fluff over here that I've got. And yeah, I just thankful to be here, man.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a wild ride, man. Glad you're okay.
Yeah, appreciate it.
And now for your current role, talk to us about, day in the life of a software engineer. Some people, they want to be a software engineer. They don't know what that actually means sometimes. What does a day in the life look like?
Well, for me, this is always going to be dependent company and team wide, right? But for me, my day-to-day, Monday through Friday, is typically starting work at about 9 o'clock. Honestly, it's kind of like a 9 to 5. Like, it's a pretty good work-life balance for me. I've got meetings every single morning, Monday through Thursday, for our daily team stand-up. Typically, they're supposed to be about 15 minutes. A lot of times they go longer than that just because we're talking with our product manager or our project manager. Those two work hand in hand along with our scrum master. We talk about any blockers we may have, which are issues resolving code that we need help with, or we're relying on somebody else. That way we can stay productive throughout the sprint that we do, right? We do agile methodology here at Wells Fargo, specifically Scrum. And for me, besides those daily stand-ups, we'll also every 2 weeks do a sprint retrospective and review. We'll do a planning session right after that for the next 2 weeks, and we'll assign the stories across the board. But most of the time, I'm like I would say the whole marketing hype or just internet hype you see of, ping pong tables. I mean, yeah, they probably have them, and all these, bougie lunches that are paid for and this and that, and these bougie offices. Like, I just got a standard office, man. I mean, yeah, I got some nice chairs. I got a nice standing desk that I use, but I mean, it's kind of a cookie cutter office. It's nothing like majorly fancy. Like it's a desk job, right? And so I think a lot of people think that they're going to be living some, bougie high lifestyle and like just super relaxed and write 5 lines of code and that's it. In reality, that's not the case. Like there are times where it can be really stressful. Like when I was starting out and learning, I mean, I still am, you're always learning, but I mean, over the past, 6 months, I mean, there's been times where I've stayed up late, 8, 9 o'clock to get something done because we need this done by this sprint, or, hey, we've had this software release that we've pushed once or twice because the business team gives us stuff last minute. So we're sitting here documenting things, testing things. It's not always just writing code and that's it, right? Like there's so much more than just, I'm going to solve this algorithm on, this screen and do it in the most efficient way possible. Like a lot of those like coding interviews and with like leak code and stuff, like most of the time you're not really doing that in the day-to-day life of a software engineer. You're just not, right? Like one, it's a filter to see who can put up with that. It's a indicator of problem solving skills, but at the end of the day, you can have someone that's amazing at leak code, but has terrible interpersonal skills and has terrible documentation skills. And at the end of the day, you could be a bad software engineer because of that, right? Like that's only one part of being a software engineer. But for me in the day-to-day life is like, yeah, get up at 9 or start work at 9, excuse me. Have daily stand-ups at 10, Monday through Thursday. I'm in office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday predominantly. I work a hybrid schedule. I forgot to mention that. So Monday, Friday, typically I'm remote. Gives me a lot of flexibility just because, I mean, I can swap a remote day here or there, but I like Monday or Friday because like I can go take care of appointments when I need. I can go grocery shopping when I need, while still getting my hours in and making sure as long as I don't miss my meetings on Mondays, I'm good, man. Like I text my teammates, let them know, hey, I'm going to go take care of this. I'll be back at this time. Just reach me on Teams since that's what we use. And it gives me a lot of flexibility. And on our in-office days, a lot of times, most people like do 6 hours because that's what's required of us. Just because like, hey, a lot of people have families and kids, so they'll, drop them off for school. By that time's done, their kids are out of school. They'll go pick them up and they'll do the remaining 2 hours from home. Right. And, I think that work-life balance is really, really important. I think the whole 100% remote work thing, I think that's going away. Unfortunately, there's a lot of companies that want to justify commercial real estate costs. But I will say as a junior developer, I have appreciated the in-person lessons and mentorship because a lot of times it is hard to get a hold of people as a software engineer. Like when you're a junior, you need a lot of time and mentorship. You are asking so many questions that it's almost just easier to have somebody right next to you. It really is. And until you're like a mid-level or senior and you can really be productive on your own, that remote work thing is going to be hard to come by as an entry-level developer. I mean, there was a time for it with COVID, but most of these companies are like, hey, get your butt back in office if you're a junior developer. And like to a certain degree, it does make sense for the junior guys because, like I said, mentorship is really required. But once you're a senior, I think the whole remote thing, I think that should really be supported, right? But that flexibility I've got at Wells Fargo, but that's kind of what life looks like for me here in Phoenix. And my office is like 15 minutes away. So, yeah.
Nice. And, obviously in the military, there's different ways depending on maybe your unit or your rank that you get evaluated. How are you evaluated as a software engineer? Is it, quarterly? Is it yearly, annually, semi-annually, whatever it is?
Yeah. So officially there is a semi-annual and a annual review. So every 6 months you do a review / check-in, and then you do a annual review. So for me, I actually like 2 days ago just got done with my first 6-month review. And so basically we had back in January, I had joined the team because for the first like 2-3 months, I had no team. I was doing as much learning as I could, learning the tech stack. I had met my lead engineer that I would be working with, but I wasn't involved with the team doing stand-up. It was just like, hey, do as much learning as you can for the first 2 to 3 months on Udemy. Luckily, I still had my Army email, and Udemy is free for Army soldiers. So I was using that for Java, for MongoDB, for Kafka, for everything we use here at Wells Fargo. I took advantage of that, even though they provide stuff through A Cloud Guru. I just found the stuff on Udemy to be a little bit more worthwhile for me because I'd already used it prior. So in January I started, and I had met my manager, my manager's manager, and we had set expectations of like, hey, as a junior developer, this is what we're wanting from you. A lot of it was understanding like the core concepts of architecture of like how all the applications are working together and the data flow coming from like Fiserv, a transaction company, all the way to certain credit card benefit teams, all the way down to ours. Because I'm on a credit card benefits team, and we run the Autograph Journey credit card for Wells Fargo. It's like a $50 statement credit annually. So that's my specific team. But pretty much with that, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Gosh dang, where were we going with this?
Just how you're evaluated.
Oh, evaluated. Yes. Okay. And so the expectations were set out like, hey, we want you to be contributing like on average, like 2 story points out of 8 for the first like 6 months you're on the team. But also having a learning mindset. Like it was very, like there were requirements that were very easy to obtain. The only one I haven't obtained was like the AZ900 Azure Fundamentals certification. Honestly, just because there's just been so much learning. But I mean, most of the requirements I was exceeding. Like I was on average contributing 4 to 6 story points for the past 6 months. Always had a learning mindset and was, according to my manager, but also my lead, I'm a quick learner. I'm eager to jump in and help out. And I think the mindset and the willingness to learn is the biggest part of being a junior developer, because this stuff takes time, man. Like you think you know a lot when you leave a boot camp, and then you get to your first role and you're like, oh my God, imposter syndrome is real, and I have know what I'm doing, and they're going to find out I'm a freaking fraud. Like I think for the first 3 months, I kept on telling my mentor, I was like, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to get fired, and they're going to think I'm a fraud, dude. They're going to know, like, just because I was always hard on myself, and I had very little Java experience. And so like my tech stack, I was like starting fresh. Like I came from a full stack JavaScript, SQL relational database, to where it's like, I'm going to object-oriented backend programming. I'm learning about Kafka, data distribution, and I'm learning about a non-SQL database or a non-relational database. And I'm like, what the heck is this, right? So, I mean, I felt like I was starting from ground zero again, even though like I had seen a lot of stuff. I felt like I was really overwhelmed. And so with the annual reviews that'll be coming up in January of next year for me, those requirements I spoke about, it's just like, hey, instead of 2 story points, it's like 4 to 6, which I'm already doing right now. And by that point, they really want me to get like my AZ900 certification. I haven't focused on it because honestly, learning so much, like you just feel at times overwhelmed and you feel burnt out. So it's one of those things where when you're a junior, you're juggling a lot, and they know that. And as long as you're open and honest during those mid reviews or annual reviews, or even just throughout, just talking with your manager, and you're transparent about that, like, I mean, they want you to succeed. Like I don't see any hostility. I don't see any people out to get you at Wells Fargo. Like I don't see that, right? I have a pretty healthy work environment, even though some of my seniors that have been around for about 10, 15 years are like, you're on a pretty good team, right? But sometimes the industry can be really cutthroat. And so one of my seniors, he's actually leaving, and he's been my mentor for the past 6 months. Amazing guy, great guy, love him to death. But he's leaving, and he's like, hey, look, like, you've got a good team here, but like, don't be so naive to think that everybody's going to be always willing to help you out. Like, there are people in the industry that will be the first chance they will get. They will try to sell you out down the river to look better for their lead or for their manager. And I haven't experienced that as of yet. I always try to have good intentions. And for me, like, coming with a very big team oriented mindset, I'm like, why would you do that? But at the end of the day, you're assessed as an individual, right? From your manager. And at the end of the day, what really matters is, did you meet that stuff according to your manager on your review? And if that means doing something that some people may deem unethical or shady, some people can do it. I'm not saying that's happened at Wells Fargo. Like, I certainly haven't done it. I haven't seen it happen, but I mean, I guarantee you it's out there. I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't be. I mean, I would say unethical people can be in any industry, right? So that kind of brings the whole, performance review full circle. But that's how I'm measured at Wells Fargo, and like the standards that have been set for me. They've been obtainable. They're not like absolutely illogical demands of a junior developer. Like, they're working with you at a snail's pace, and they're really trying to invest in you here at this company. And I'm really glad that I actually got brought on and worked with them. I'm very thankful for them and giving me the opportunity to have my first role, because I don't know where I would be right now if it wasn't for this company. So
awesome. Yeah, and I'm glad you got that role. And yeah, good point on imposter syndrome. I mean, you can be working for years, you're still going to feel it whenever you
absolutely
do something new or whatever it may be. So it doesn't go away. You just got to learn how to manage it.
Yeah.
And then hopefully by the time this comes out, this will be old news with the Crowdstrike bug today.
Oh my God.
Again,
Yeah.
we don't really know who did it, but it's maybe a software engineer who introduced a bug into some kind of software, which then, took out airlines and banks and all kinds of things today. So
Yeah.
the real question is, have you pushed anything to break anything yet? Any code to production that broke anything yet?
No, I haven't broken anything and pushed it to prod unintentionally. That I know of, right? For all I know, we could go live in the next 2-3 weeks, and it's like my name is on that get blame annotation, and I'm going to have a talk with my manager. No, as of right now, there hasn't been any serious stuff. I will say the biggest thing you always like get told in like a coding boot camp, or mine was like, don't push your env file, right? Don't push your env file to your GitHub with your credentials and so forth. Well, unfortunately, I did something very similar to that, right? It wasn't like a public domain or anything. It was just a company and a team Git. But I didn't even realize I had done it until like a month later when we were like reviewing stuff. And I was like, oh my God. But like immediately I had told my lead, I was like, hey, I just realized that this happened. Like, just come clean. Like, it's like stuff like that as a junior I'm not saying it's going to happen, like that you should want to strive to do that, obviously. But, that's where the joke of the intern pushing stuff to prod kind of comes from, right? Like, it's an unintentional thing. I don't think anybody would actually, do that on purpose. And if you do, like, you come up on the net ASAP and you say something. But that's also why you have all these code reviews. It's why you do unit testing to test every single method that you write. It's why you do automation testing to make sure your application integrates well and works as expected on a daily basis, and not just in one environment, but across 3 to 4 environments, right? So there's so many levels of testing that go on, and also review of that testing, that by the time it gets to production, it's also gone past QA to where we've got good QA here that's like really hounding us every step of the way to ask, why are you doing this? Why is this not like, I mean, to the point where QA drives you mad, but it's their job. And talking with the whole Microsoft thing, I mean, more than likely they probably have a rollback mechanism. I mean, it still probably costs, it cost airlines and banks, it probably cost people millions, right? And so whatever director or lead or team out there, if they're not let go, they're probably going to have some serious eyes on them and remarks their way, if we're being honest. I mean, you cost a company millions of dollars or an industry millions of dollars. Yeah, that's nothing when you're only paid 150, 200K a year if you're a higher up engineer, right? But that's they more than likely had a rollback mechanism. More than likely, they reversed to that version of code that worked across the board. They've probably solved it. I mean, I went to Whole Foods, just before I got on this podcast with you guys, and like half their machines were down because of this outage, right? Like this has affected all, like at the Phoenix International Airport, like flights are delayed still. Like it's affected, tens of millions of dollars probably. And so it's nothing to joke about. Like when you don't push reliable code to production, or you don't test it thoroughly, or something slips through the cracks, somebody's going to be held accountable, right? And I don't know who that's going to be. From what I know, Wells Fargo wasn't affected, and I'm not going to speak on that. But from what I know, our team isn't affected, and I'm glad that hasn't happened, and we're not the ones who did it. So,
rumor has it was your .env file.
Dude, oh man, that would be the worst. Honestly, there are times where I have some pretty bad luck. So if I'm ever on a Microsoft Azure team in the future, God forbid that happens, man. Oh my gosh. Oh, that would be terrible.
Imagine if we got punished like we did in the military. But yeah, speaking of the military, especially being infantrymen, like coding is so foreign, especially to me, probably to you. We're both infantry guys, and I'm always thinking about ways to because for me, tech was always out of sight, out of mind, and I'm always trying to figure out ways to show the fruits of tech to grunts, whether it's the culture or the pay or whatever. And I'm noticing a lot of your posts on LinkedIn as well. It seems very better and forward. What's one sort of what's one tip you would give to a transitioning vet about tech?
One tip transitioning into tech as a vet.
Or what do you think? Let me rephrase it. What's one thing you wish every transitioning vet knew about the tech industry?
There's a lot of overlap and a lot of flexibility. So what I mean by that is you can start out at a help desk. You can start out as a junior developer. You can just start out as a SOC analyst. If you get that role, typically you need a degree for that, but there are ways. And you can start at that level, and if you get on with a company and you network, right, and you start learning, you can go to a different area of tech like DevOps or software development pretty well with either a coding bootcamp or a certification of some kind. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to tech that I didn't really think that you would have, right? I didn't really think about that. One of my other good friends I serve with, he got his degree, but really, I mean, he did it for the internship, but he's in cyber. But he was like, hey, dude, you should go the cyber route, and actually switching over from a developer role to cyber is actually really good. And it's actually really marketable because a lot of cyber guys don't know how to code. And it's actually a really good thing that that's sought after because you can problem solve to a level, and you have a skill set that cyber guys don't have. And I didn't even know that. I thought it was kind of like these siloed off areas that you didn't know. Whereas there are developers who, instead of doing developing stuff, after 10, 15 years, they went to go be a scrum master, or they went to go do DevOps instead. Or they went to go do site reliability engineering after 10, 15 years, and they were able to go do it. And it, they all either had a computer science background or a coding boot camp, or a degree in IT of some kind, which, I mean, you can do a degree of IT if you want, but I mean, at that point you can just get a few certifications and get an apprenticeship or something. And that's equally as good, because in tech, What they care about is your experience. The degree is just to help you get your foot in the door if you do the whole college route. That's really what it is. Like most of the time, if you get a CS degree, you're going for the internship, because the internship is it's going to get your foot in the door to build relationships, to say, hey, yeah, we'd love to have you for next summer as an intern. Hey, we'd love to bring you on full time, right? And that's how a lot of things work out in this industry. Like the degree is only one part, and like other countries like India, like how like a lot of my coworkers are, they're contractors. For them, they have to have a degree in computer science because the competition's so fierce. Here, it's not as much. So it's like there's a really good window of opportunity and a flexibility for veterans, because here's the thing, like you don't have to know everything. I sure as hell didn't. And I was able to break into the software engineering field without a computer science degree, without any college debt, saving 4 years of school, and I'm getting paid the same amount. I'm not getting paid any less because I don't have a degree, and I'm still working as a software engineer. Like, to me, the way I viewed it was, dang, I get a really good return on my investment working in the IT industry. And I mean, there are people that go to college for 4 years that are still making less money than I am, right? Like, it's one of those things where it's a really good industry for opportunity. And I think a lot of veterans would be selling themselves short, because here at the end of the day, even if you do a Skillbridge for IT or a coding boot camp or whatever, and you don't like it, you don't have to do it. I mean, yeah, you can get a job, but like there's no requirement saying that your CSP program, you have to go be a lineman, or you have to go do this or that. Like there's no contract like the Army saying that you have to go do this thing, right? You might choose not to go, and you're like, you know what? I tried this. I really don't like it. And that's the worst that happens. Like you don't have golden handcuffs for 4 or 5 years like you would with an enlistment contract, man. Like the world is your oyster when you get out. And like, yeah, it's freaky when you're given the school bus, wheel to actually drive at this point after it's been driven for me for like 7 years, as like the analogy I'm using. Cause like for me, it's like, okay, well, what the hell do I freaking do with this? I'm the one that's driving the bus now. But on the flip side, you can go do whatever you want. And if you don't like it, like, don't turn off an industry because you're like, oh, I've never been a nerdy guy. Like, dude, I was never a coder. I honestly thought I was too dumb for it. Like, I really did. Like, I love to read. I like to challenge myself physically and intellectually. And I knew I could do better than where I was at. But I didn't think I would be like at the computer science level, right? Like I really didn't. And I'm here. Every single one of my coworkers has master's degrees in computer science. They're really smart. They're really kind people. I mean, yeah, a lot of them are pretty nerdy, right? But my interpersonal skills definitely shine. My my documenting skills, for all the code that you are making or testing really comes to shine, because I have a good attention to detail and I really care about the work I'm doing. And the technical skills I'm learning as I go along, right? So I've got a lot of these good soft skills that a lot of veterans have that you guys would really, really excel at, as long as you put forth the effort and you want to learn. It's not impossible. Like you're selling yourself short if you think that, oh, I shouldn't go into tech because it's nerdy, or it's way too challenging for me. Like, you're just pigeonholing yourself at that point, man. So don't pigeonhole yourself. It's a very flexible industry. And so I would say realize the amount of flexibility and freedom that you have and lean into that, and realize just because if it doesn't work out, even if you try it, you can go back to school, right? If you use VetTech, or not VetTech, but if you use a CSP program and you get some training, at that point, like, you don't have to go do it. You can go back to school if you want instead. Like it's an opportunity for you to figure out what you want to do. And it's completely free. Like in the CSP, hell, like I knew people that did barista stuff as a CSP and they were still paid by the Army. Obviously, like, I don't think that's the most wise use of a CSP, but it's still technically one you could do, but that's my take on it in regards to the IT industries. Don't pigeonhole yourself. There's a lot of flexibility. There's a lot of overlap, and you're selling yourself short if you do pigeonhole yourself.
Love it. Well, this has been so insightful, man. We pushed for an hour, and Yeah, I learned so much, and I gotta say, like before we end it, do you ever miss jumping out of planes now that you're coding?
There's a part of me that misses it. I do miss the adrenaline rush. But at the same time, I also have knee and back issues. And on my 25th and last jump of November of 2023, I had a 2-in-1 malfunction and I almost died. I had a cigarette roll and I collided with a jumper midair and we rode each other's chutes to the ground. And I don't know which one we rode. And it was posted on Wetsu or one of the airborne infantry pages you'd find on social media. And everybody that saw us fall, they all thought I was dead, or they thought we were dead. And there was 3 feet of snow on the ground. And honestly, by the grace of God, I was like, all right, this is my last jump in my 25th one. I'll just take that as a good sign, working for the chaplain at that time as a chaplain's assistant. Let's just leave it on that note and just not do this again. So that's kind of, there's a part of me that misses it, but honestly, it's just a romanticized version. I left for a reason. The jumping got old after a certain amount of time, including all the weight. I've got knee and back issues, and there's a time and place for it. I'm very thankful for my service, but it's only a chapter.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And Alex, we really appreciate having you on.
Yeah.
Definitely drop some good knowledge there, and we're gonna link your LinkedIn in the description. So if anyone wants to reach out to you, and is there anything else you're working on, or anything you want to plug? I know you have a blog and stuff.
Yeah, so I've got a blog on Medium that you can also find on my LinkedIn page as well. It's medium.com @Thomas Peterec. Pretty straightforward. I post every now and then. I haven't posted in a while, but I've just been focusing on my job. But most of my articles have really been more veteran focused. I'll be doing a 1-year performance review or 1-year review in September of like what life is like as a junior software engineer. So that'll be something to look forward to. Next few weeks is I'll be publishing the whole post 1 year from the Army. So that'll be more veteran focused. But I just like to write and journal. I've been journaling for years. I started doing that in Afghanistan. So check out the LinkedIn. I'm always willing to chat and network with other veterans, always wanting to help. And hopefully my blogs do as well, because I'm just trying to pay it forward. And that's all I ask other veterans to do is to do the same. Is just, if I help you, you help somebody else, because honestly, once you get out, you realize we're all that we got, man. Like seriously, like networking with other veterans, it really does help.
Yeah, big fan of it. And we'll post the resource that we talked about in the podcast description. Sorry, I lost my bearing earlier in the beginning. I'll haze myself for that. But we'll post our socials, and if you got suggestions, or if you want to be on the pod, feel free to reach out to us. And thanks again for listening, folks. All right, that's the pod.